Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to another edition of Breaking News. Today is Thursday, the 13th day of June, 2024. And as always, we're going to look at the headlines and see how they fit with what the Bible has to say about what will take place in our world before the second coming of Christ and the events that precede it. And as we've been saying, what's taken place is so predictable with the headlines. Here we go. First of all, the U.S. says there's a Gaza ceasefire hostage deal on the table. Hamas should take it. Again, they keep going back to this. Biden is expected to secure the help of other G7 countries, France, Germany, Italy, Great Britain, Canada, and Japan, which have already backed the agreement to pressure Hamas to accept the deal. But this is to no avail, as we're going to see. Our second headline is Hamas urges the U.S. to pressure Israel in an effort to reach a ceasefire. Hamas said on Wednesday it has shown full positivity in efforts to reach a ceasefire agreement with Israel in the Gaza Strip conflict. In a statement, the Palestinian group said it has urged the U.S., Israel's biggest ally, to pressure Israel to accept a deal leading to a permanent ceasefire in the enclave, and that's the key. Hamas said that while U.S. officials have said Israel has accepted a ceasefire proposal outlined by President Joe Biden on May 31st, we have not heard any Israeli official confirm this acceptance. And this is what it's over. Hamas is basically demanding that, first and foremost, a permanent ceasefire is declared to start. In other words, this is the starting point, and they're not going to back off from that. What Israel says, no, we'll get to that eventually, but there's other things that must take place in the meantime. That's why we come to headline number 3. Israel is pessimistic. It deems Hamas's ceasefire response as one of the most extreme possible. Now, it wasn't until last night that Israel finally responded to Hamas's demands. They had a 2-day holiday, and the holiday ends, of course, at evening there when the next day begins in Israel. So the government of Israel started responding to Hamas's demands. And so what happens is we find out a lot more about what the demands consist of. We've had a little drips and drabs, but we're going to get a lot more right now. Here's bottom line. Officials in Israel say terror groups' list of demands amounts to effective rejection of the truce proposal. In other words, they're rejecting Biden's proposal, and chances of a deal under such conditions are negligible. Israeli officials voiced pessimism Wednesday night after Hamas presented its response to its ceasefire proposal, dubbing it one of the most extreme possible. Israeli officials who analyzed Hamas's response concluded that the chances of a deal under these conditions are negligible. I would say non-existent. Israeli sources described Hamas's reply to U.S. President Joe Biden's proposal as a non-starter and criticized Washington's involvement. On Wednesday evening, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held a phone conversation with top security officials following Hamas's response. Senior Israeli officials said that Hamas perceives Israel as being in a difficult position, allowing them to set unrealistic conditions. And that's the key. Remember, we had a story, what was it, yesterday? Sinwar, who's there somewhere hiding in the tunnels in Gaza, is saying time is on our side. We will just continue to wait it out because we've got Israel exactly where we want them. We're in no hurry, and that's why they can put these unrealistic conditions, thinking that Israel will eventually budge more and more to giving up and allowing Hamas to win. And Hamas wins by staying in power. That is the key. They still want to exist after all this is over. Anyway, here's the for instances here. Hamas opposes giving Israel veto power over the release of high-profile prisoners in exchange for abducted soldiers, even though Israel agreed to compromise by retaining veto power only over half of the 200 high-profile prisoners expected to be included in the deal. Hamas is basically saying, no, we will tell you 100% which prisoners will be released if we're going to release your hostages. And these not only include murderers, they include murderers from October 7th who were captured afterwards, who, killed those, 1,200 people that day. And they want them to be released too. That's their demand. Okay, there's more. Additionally, Hamas demands to advance the timeline for Gaza's reconstruction from phase 3 of the agreement to phase 1. In other words, you have to start the reconstruction immediately. They insist on the immediate removal of Israel's established Netzarim corridor. That's basically it bisects the northern and southern parts of Gaza. It was a great military achievement when they got that. They said, okay, Israel has to leave, so there's no bisection dividing the north and the south of Gaza. from what's going on. They refuse to accept a deadline for renewing hostilities if no agreement is made in phase two. In other words, the way it stands now, if they accepted Biden's agreement, they would have to be negotiating what happens next. Hamas says, no, no, no. Immediate ceasefire. Israel has to leave. They have to get all their soldiers out of there, their army there. So Gaza will not be divided between North and South. They rejected the demand to free the prisoners, insisting the prisoners can go back to Gaza, because Israel said, if we're going to release some of these, we don't want them to come back to Gaza. And Hamas says, no, no, they have to come back to where they were sent. Now, it gets worse. Hamas also demands guarantees from China, Russia, and Turkey for ending the conflict, in addition to U.S. assurances, a condition, of course, Israel deems unacceptable. Senior Israeli officials indicated that Hamas in Gaza, their leader Sinwar, distrusts Israel and believes Israel will sabotage the agreement over minor issues. Thus, Sinwar insists on resolving everything before the first phase, ensuring Israel enters the humanitarian phase, knowing that the war is over with no exit strategy. In other words, first and foremost, permanent ceasefire. The war is going to be over. We'll work on the exchange of hostages, and we are going to remain in power. That's it. Now, unlike in the past where the ball was in Israel or Hamas's court, officials noted now it's in Washington's court. Now, the United States, what are they going to do about it? While the Americans also reject Hamas's demands, Israeli officials believe the U.S. lacks leverage over Qatar, which has not imposed any sanctions on Hamas, such as expelling its members or seizing the bank accounts. It's hard to see how a deal will be made from the Israeli side. Hamas's response is a rejection of the agreement. In fact, Blinken said this. They're making impossible demands. This is not a non-starter. So Hamas is counting on pressure from the U.S. and the rest of the world for Israel to cave in. And then you have things like this. This is one of the most idiotic statements I've ever heard, but it's coming out of Washington and the Biden administration. So we're not surprised. Headline number 4, White House's Sullivan says, well, the ceasefire proposal changes from Hamas are actually minor. Can you believe that? White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said on Wednesday changes proposed by Hamas to the ceasefire proposal are minor, and the United States will work with Egypt and Qatar to bridge the gaps in the proposal. Many of the proposed changes are minor and not unanticipated. Others differ more substantially from what was outlined in the UN Security Council resolution, he said. All right, though Blinken says that Hamas's response is unworkable, you have fools like Sullivan playing down the changes. Again, this would result in Israel's defeat. Everything they have done militarily would be for naught. The soldiers that went into Gaza to fight for all these, this groundwork that they're doing to get rid of Hamas would have died in vain. The people who were murdered on the of October 7th would have died in vain with no response to that, and Hamas would win the victory. Okay, so this is where we've got Jake Sullivan saying this. Now, will this be the Biden administration's official response? It's not that bad. Israel, just declare a permanent ceasefire, get your troops out of there, leave everything behind, let Hamas take over, the middle of the country where you've divided them front and back. Let them take over the border with Egypt, the 8-mile corridor where they can go again to, smuggle in supplies, weapons, and the such like. And then we'll have everything fine, and we'll have peace in the Middle East. Oh, yes, and you have to have a Palestinian state too that needs to be put into place. So we'll see. Will that be their response? Who knows? All right, but see here, Israel between the proverbial rock and the hard place, with really not a friend in the U.S. But this is not their only problem. Headline number 5: Northern Israel mayors. The situation can't go on. The time for decisive action has come. With hundreds of rockets flying over their communities, local leaders demand government take action against Hezbollah, allowing residents to return home safely. Yesterday, there were over 200 rockets, as we talked about this, launched from Lebanon. Moshe Davidovich, the head of the Mata Asher Regional Council in northern Israel, told Ynet News on Thursday, anyone who looked at the northern skies on Shavuot, that's the Feast of Weeks, remember we talked about this yesterday, the celebration of the giving of the law at Mount Sinai, which they've just had a 2-day holiday, which just ended last night. They would have thought it was Independence Day, he said, because of all the rockets in the air. In other words, they're shooting off rockets, but these are not rockets shooting off and rejoicing for the giving of the law. These are rockets that are shot from Lebanon trying to kill the Israelis. If you have that app, we talked about this, the Red Alert Israel app that goes off every time a rocket is shot from anywhere against Israel. My thing never stopped last night, all day yesterday, and it continues on this morning. They're continuing bombarding Israel from Lebanon. So you've got it from the north, too. Now, headline 6, Ben-Gvir says to the prime minister, surgical actions are not the response to hundreds of rockets. After Hezbollah launched over 200 rockets from Lebanon into northern Israel in an unprecedented escalation, National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir said on Wednesday night he called on Prime Minister Netanyahu to respond with forces against the Iranian-backed terrorist group. This evening, Netanyahu is once again holding a security consultation. He said in response to the reports that the premier was consulting top security officials on the escalation of the northern front after the killing of a top Hezbollah commander overnight, he said kudos for the strike in Lebanon, but surgical actions are not the response to hundreds of rockets. There is no doubt that the prime minister's deplorable practice of excluding me from security discussions proved itself during the events of October 7th. Netanyahu, the excuses are over. You are the prime minister and you can no longer hide behind Gantz and Eisenkot. And again, they were the two that left the war cabinet, the leftists that were there. And so Netanyahu now has to either to fill that or just to continue on with the people that are on this war cabinet. But as Ben-Gvir said, what are you going to do? These people can't live. We talked about this yesterday. Some of our friends who have relatives there in northern Israel, they're scared to death. Their 80-year-old grandparents got off a train there and had to run as fast as they could just to get an air raid shelter because the bombs continue on from northern Israel. What a mess. All right. And then, of course, you have this. The U.S. military urges de-escalation as Israel-Lebanon tensions rise. Here we go again. Remember the other day, U.S. said, now you don't want to escalate this, Israel, because Iran might enter in this, and that would cause a regional war. The U.S. military on Wednesday night urged a de-escalation in rising tensions between Israel and Lebanon, said U.S. Secretary Lloyd Austin. He raised the matter in a call with his Israeli counterpart on Tuesday. We don't want to see a wider regional conflict, and we want to see a de-escalation of tensions in the region, Pentagon spokesperson Sabrina Singh told a news briefing. Well, Hezbollah fired the most rockets that it's launched in a single day since the cross-border hostilities broke out 8 months ago as part of its retaliation for an Israeli strike that killed a senior Hezbollah field commander. And so Israel is supposed to tone down its response where they get hundreds of rockets hit every day. How come they don't talk to Hezbollah? How come they're not talking with them? Just as why isn't the world condemning Hamas for what they have done and what they are doing? It's the fault of these two groups. And we got a story that we're going to give you this on the second breaking news today, where it's a very long story. It's about 8 or 9 pages long. I'll have to summarize it for you, but it's an excellent story from Ynet News, basically sharing how Iran is being behind all of this. They've taken years and years to set the table this way, to get these countries under their authority, and they're the ones calling the shots. That's why they are not going to let up, not going to let up the pressure. And sooner or later, they believe that Israel will have to knuckle under. So that's where we're at today. It's a terrible spot for Israel. And so what we're going to see is the United States now trying to get some type of conclusion or resolution there. What will they do? Will they try to force Israel basically to give up, to lose their advantage that they have in Gaza, to give up all the military achievements there on the border in the middle of the country, and then just say, well, let's forget it. Let's just go home and try and make some peace, when Hamas would see that, and it would be, of course, a victory for them, a victory for Iran, and would only cause further October 7th to happen with even worse circumstances. So that's the mess that Israel's in today. So we'll see what happens today in Israel this afternoon when we do our second broadcast. We'll give you the latest updates. Bottom line is this. Israel, as the Bible predicts, is in an impossible situation at the time of the end. And as we know from Scripture, it's only going to get worse. It's going to get a lot worse because Israel will be eventually isolated from the entire world. They will have no friends anywhere. Sign number 21 of our 25 signs, we're near the end. Anti-Semitism will increase worldwide to the place where everybody is against Israel, and that's where we're moving right now. So again, we urge you, first and foremost, because this is what we do here on Breaking News, to find out what the Bible has to say the world will eventually be like at the time of the end, who's on whose side, what will happen, because it lays it out for us real clearly, as we do here and share with you every single day. And if you're new here, the breaking news that we've done in the past, you can click them on, and we have a summary and explanation every single time of what we've said and how it all works, fulfilling Bible prophecy. You can click that on. You want to cut and paste it, select it, and read it, because every day what the stories do is make it very clear that God's word is being fulfilled right in front of our very eyes. So we'll be back with you in a little while, a few hours from now, and give you the latest. Until then, thank you so much for watching. Keep praying, and please study so understand what's going on according to Scripture. I'm Don Stewart, and until then, may the Lord, as always, richly bless.